Hello, I'm Jeanne Bjork, and this is Desperate Times Call for Markmaking Magic. Hopefully, you were attracted to come to this because you thought you wanted to hear about chaos and nightmare, and then how I get to magically turn it into something successful. Hopefully, by the end, you'll feel like it is actually magic. My name's Jeanne Bjork. As I said, I teach at Pewaukee High School, which is in Wisconsin. And I teach in the high school program. I've been there, this is my 20th year. You can find me at email, you can find my website. The QR code under my picture will actually take you to the specific web page I created for this presentation. So it has links to all of the handouts. It'll have a link to this presentation as well. I'm on Twitter as Bellafiore3, and I'm also have a personal Instagram with that same username. On Instagram, I have an art club account actually for my school called the PHS Art Club because we're pirates, the Pewaukee Pirates. And then this whole presentation kind of stemmed from hosting the K-12 art chat and then eventually recording a podcast with Matt and Laura Grundler from the K-12 art chat. And so that's where this kind of came from. We talked to each other about a year ago, more or less, and thought this might be a fun topic to present here at NAEA. So before COVID, there was this amazing classroom that I teach in, and there were all these awesome things that we would do, and kids got to play around and try all kinds of stuff, and it was really media rich, and it was really exciting, and we had these boot camps, and kids were doing all sorts of things, and then and then it got locked down, and we got locked out pretty much like a year ago, and I don't know how it was by you, but by us, we teachers had like a day to go in and get what we needed. Students didn't really get to go get anything, and so everyone went home with barely anything to make art with, and it was really kind of scary, and kind of sad and depressing. And I was teaching mostly advanced classes, and so those kids were kids who were juniors and seniors, a lot of them, and had waited their whole art career to be in the classes that they were in, and then were really bummed that they weren't going to get to use the fabulous facility and get to try all of those cool things. So how could we keep going? How could we still be a choice-based classroom when we weren't even in the classroom anymore? Um, I feel like the quarantine actually made us stretch creatively quite a bit, and I'll talk about that. And it kind of challenged us to think about, what are the weirdest things we could make marks with? Since I don't have any paint at home, what else could I use? And I never brought home a canvas or a paper, so what could I paint on or draw on? And so that goal to be kind of out there actually pushed us creatively, and kids started to do really unusual things. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that here today as well. So first, I want to go backwards to the not so distant past pre-COVID times, and that idea of alternative mark making. And I love the word alternative. I am a punk rocker at heart, growing up in the 80s and 70s, and I just love that idea of alternative. It's kind of rebellious. It's kind of like, breaking the rules. And I love that idea of knowing what the rules of art making are, but stretching them, mashing them up, mixing things together that maybe aren't supposed to be mixed together, but figuring out a way to do it. And so I teach in a media based curriculum. And so this idea kind of allows me to teach things that maybe aren't in that curriculum. For example, exactly where do fiber arts belong in drawing and painting? They don't. If you don't have a photography class, but you want to teach image transfer techniques, how do you do that? So this idea of using alternative media gives you that opportunity to teach things that aren't in your media-based classroom or curriculum, excuse me. It also creates that wow factor in class. There's an energy to the novel and the new. Kids get really excited about things that maybe to us aren't that new, but for students it is. They're so tied to their phones and to their devices, but something like embroidery can actually be really exciting. I've actually had boys especially who love embroidery and felting. So the novel and the new creates excitement in your classroom. It also challenges students to fail and think outside of their usual little boxes of, I need to make this perfect, realistic drawing or painting. When you do alternative media, that you kind of let go of that realism, and it allows students to really go somewhere else with their work. And then lastly, it allows students to experiment, and it engages those who are disengaged.
Oh my god, I haven't pulled this up in a while. Hold on, ready?
So satisfying. I love this.
So I love this. I love that kids love what they're doing. It's really exciting and awesome. And I don't know if you heard that, but the quote's so satisfying. They said that again and again throughout the felting boot camp that we set up. So, what does this look like? I'm going to give you some kind of like a template or a framework of how to set up boot camps in your class, in your choice-based classroom. And obviously I'm a high school teacher, so I'm gearing this towards high school, but I think you could definitely take what I'm saying and use it at an elementary or middle school level. I taught first grade for 10 years, so I know that first graders can actually do a lot that they're actually sometimes very similar to high school kids. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. So let's look at what this looks like.
What is that? He's just painting on me. Yeehaw. I need more paint. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't notice. The smart guy. It looks better. I think so. Don't like that texture. That was a disaster.
We got Wednesday and 11.
So, what could you do? So, some of the media that I've taught through these classes is in drawing and painting. We've tried encaustics, we've tried needle felting, we've tried stitching, we've tried invented tools, making our own paintbrushes. We've done nature-based pigments. We've done printmaking, handmade paper, handmade artist books. In photography, we've done image transfers, made our own digital substrates to print on. We've printed on fabric, wood, glass. We've done stitching, felting, weaving, all as part of a photography program. Students have learned to use a laser etcher. In AP Art, because they've had all of this and then they come into AP, they do everything. So how do I get all this stuff? Well, for one thing, I apply for grants. I'm lucky. I do teach in a district that's pretty generous, and we're in a decent, it's a suburb of Milwaukee, and it's pretty well off. But that being said, my budget has limits. So a lot of what I've added to the program has happened over the years through donations, through grants, through fundraising that I've done, and we've gradually built this really amazing program that is media rich and has lots of experiences. So we're just going to watch this video real quick. It's
Oh, wait for it. That looks so cool.
Like that.
No. Mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, let me know. Oh, we ran out of time. That was not working. For me. Oh, here it comes. For me.
All I can remember is the
So, despite that being a bit silly, there is an energy when you teach like this. The kids cheer each other on. They're jamming out to music, but they're also really excited about what they're making. That was a photography class, and they were doing image transfer. And there's another video that shows the girl actually pulling back the transfer and revealing it, and that it worked. So I love that energy. I'm a photographer at heart. That's who I am, and that's how I started in art. And that's how I started to learn about this idea of trying alternative things. I mean, I started in the dark room back in high school, and now the dark room is alternative. We're doing things a different way. So my investigations in my own art making started that way. You may have seen or heard my talk called Digital Gets Dirty, which is all about photography and all these different processes you can try in photography. But that's where I started. In my master's program, I was trying to print, I was trying to figure out a way to print old fashioned photos and like do aprons and stuff. And my professor kind of was like, he had this New York accent, which I can't really imitate, but he's like, you want to make fabric? You want to make aprons? Why don't you print on fabric? And I was like, you can do that? And he's like, yeah, you can do that. And so suddenly that discovery in my own art making is something that translated for my students. And so I also, along about that time in 2010, 2011, I was starting to really change how I taught. And I was becoming more and more of a choice-based classroom. Teaching for artistic behavior, that idea of tab, but I was like, well, no, I'm not tab, because I'm, like, kids don't just do whatever they want. I still have sort of control over them and stuff. But I read the book by Melissa Purdy, of course I can't remember the name, and Ian Sands, but it's all about the high school classroom, and that idea of that there are different levels of choice, that you don't have to be just completely allowing students to work in any media they want. It can be within a media-based curriculum. You can actually be a choice-based classroom with graduated choice. And so I discovered that I was already a choice classroom with the way I was teaching. So this is how our curriculum is structured. It's a three-pronged approach, kind of like the AP portfolio. There's 2D design, which is mostly the digital art classes we offer. There's 3D design, and then there's the mark-making strand of the curriculum. And so students take those entry-level courses, which are listed in red. Intro to Art is the required class to get into everything. And then we have an additional requirement for the digital courses, because there's just a little more technical info kids need to know. And then the blue levels, those are all like the level 1. So in those earlier classes, there's a lot more control. There's a lot more rules that kids have to follow. There's a lot more craftsmanship and skill being taught. But by the second half of each of those classes, we really try to start giving kids choice. And we want them to start to develop a voice as an artist and to create concepts that are important to them. And so that's kind of how things work. And then as they move up into those more advanced classes, they have modified choice, and they start to really explore and experiment and start to figure out, what do I want to do? What do I want to say? Who am I as an artist? And the more tools you can add to their toolbox, the more they can do. I also love, as they get into these more advanced classes, they really start to see that interconnectedness of their art practice. It's not just about this is photography and this is drawing. It's about I'm an artist and I need to use this media to make my work and say what I want to say. I think that's powerful. So it all starts with visual journals. I think visual journals are the basis of everything that I do. We start using them in the intro course. And I first kind of changed from sketchbooks to visual journals. I mean, physically, it's the same thing. A visual journal is a sketchbook, but the concept of what is a visual journal is way different. I was in this art exhibit in Minneapolis that had Leonardo da Vinci's notebooks on display, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm like in Leonardo da Vinci's head. I can like see how he's thinking and how he's planning and how these things like the way a river flows inspired his inventions. And the idea of making our thinking and our design process visual, I was like, we have to change. We have to start doing our sketchbooks this way. Prior to that aha moment, sketchbooks were like 6 boxes. You drew 6 thumbnails. You came up, you told your teacher, I want to do that one, and then you did your work. And there really wasn't a lot of visual research. There really wasn't a lot of individualized personal connection to that process. And so visual journals allow that. They're kind of like note taking, sketchnoting, but even further. And so I love this graphic here. Visual journals should have letters. They should have typography. They should connect your thoughts with lines and arrows and all kinds of fantastic stuff. There should be bullet points, but they don't just have to be circles. They can be visual bullet points, and there should be frames. Put things in frames, organize your ideas. Make things look realistic, make things beautiful. The visual journal itself could become a work of art, and of course, connect to people. The point is to communicate your process, to communicate your idea, to connect to your learning. So I tell students, we don't have a textbook for these classes. You are designing your book. What are you going to put in it? So think of a visual journal as almost like a scrapbook of your learning and your thinking and your ideas. And once I started teaching that way, students loved it, and it became this incredible thing. Yes, it takes more time. It takes a lot more time to teach this way. I have to give a lot more time to students to develop their ideas through visual research, but it's incredible because the ideas are their own ideas. They're not them just copying and we're all making the exact same thing. We're not at all. They're all making different work. And kind of cool thing about this is the AP College Board that started to recognize this way of teaching and this way of learning, and the new AP Art Sustained Investigation, which is now in its second year, is based on that idea of practice, experimentation, process, revision, synthesis. So what I was doing with students in their visual journals and with that idea of visual research, connecting and planning, it ends up, it's a great way a great foundation to set kids up for success when they do get to AP. You can see the pages are really colorful. They involve multimedia. I insist on that I give my kids, they have all kinds of supplies they can have access to at all times. I teach collage and what collage is. The pages are really beautiful, and it connects them to their learning. They have a richer understanding of what they need to do and how they want to do it. Thumbnails are still part of it. Learning about artists and art history is part of it too, but it all connects and makes their learning experience richer and better. And then sometimes the pages themselves become works of art. This one on the right side, she actually put this in into her portfolio for AP because it was a beautiful page. So how do you get started with this program? So first of all, I think research and boot camps are a really important part of how you develop your own program. And I just showed you how we do research in visual journals. But the idea is that you would keep teaching the way you teach. So you still would give content through slides or Pinterest or however you present content, you would still do that. You would still show exemplar artists. You'd still show the videos you show. You would determine how much of that are you giving students, how much of it are like resources you're giving students, and then they're doing their own research and investigation. Using those visual journals, they take notes, they look at things, they start to say, hey, that artist, I really connected with them. If you give them valuable resources that go beyond Google, kids in my class aren't allowed to use Google. I give them websites that have really great information. So if you can curate a great collection of resources for them, they can take things really far. So determine how much research is going to happen before a boot camp. And a boot camp is just basically a week, 2 weeks, a day, whatever you set it up to be, but it gives students an opportunity to explore, and it gives students an opportunity to learn a new skill. So consider reinforcing your content through handouts during the boot camps. Develop written handouts, and I do have some templates for you that you're welcome to use. But develop a written handout that delineates, what is the boot camp structure going to be? What are the expectations during boot camp? It can't just be a free-for-all. My boot camps are really organized, but yet there's a lot going on during them. So here's a boot camp template, and like I said, you will have access to this. It's on that webpage that I shared with you at the beginning. Identify the groups who are going to be in the boot camp, so who's in what group, and what are they doing when they get to each station. Is there a leader? Sometimes I'll assign a kid to be a leader depending on how things are. And maybe the leader has a certain role. Maybe they're scanning the QR code and showing a video to the group, and they have to watch the video first, and then they're doing whatever it is they're doing. We use Canvas as a learning management system, so usually everything is posted on Canvas, and kids can watch it there. They all have their own Chromebook, so sometimes I'll tell them to bring your Chromebook to the station so you can look at what you need to look at. Identify what the stations are, explain the rotations, your ones are going to move to 2, 2s are going to 3, or whatever, and explain cleanup directions. You don't want to end up with a chaotic mess in your room with only 5 minutes to spare before your next class. So make sure students know what to do to clean up, and make sure that they help you. I try to keep things kind of organized in small groupings on tables, maybe on a cart, so it's really easy to put things away and switch directions for the next class. Give them handouts that have additional directions or QR codes. And then I put everything, like I said, it goes on the learning management system as well, so it's been backed up. It's somewhere else for them to find. I strongly encourage you to work in tiny sizes. Use small sample sizes for the boot camps for these stations so that kids aren't consuming all of your supplies. It's just meant to be a taste so that they can kind of get a feel for, how do I do this. So this is one of my handouts. This is for the Make Your Own Invented Tools station, and the QR codes at the bottom are some of the resources that I shared with students. But the point of a boot camp is it's an opportunity for students to learn something new without the penalty of a grade, without worrying about what if I don't get it, what if I fail. They shouldn't be thinking about any of that. In fact, taking a risk and trying it is rewarded. I want students to experiment and to play when they get to the station. I tell them you're kind of like a scientist. This is your experiment, and you're collecting data. Collect all of your data. Don't judge anything. Just collect it, do it, collect it, and keep going. So this is a chance to fill their toolbox with skills and with ideas. Handouts are great to reinforce the learning. Here's a couple more. This is a fiber arts station handout and a encaustics handout that I did. So determine how long they're going to stay at the rotations. I teach in a block schedule, and I see them every other day. So in an 85-minute block, take away 10 minutes for instruction, 5 minutes for cleanup. Maybe they get to spend about 60 minutes or so at the stations. So is that going to be one full class period that they're there for full 60 minutes? You're going to split that into half-hour sessions. How many days is your boot camp going to last? So those are all things you want to think about. I tell them they have to stay at the station and keep making art the entire time that they're assigned, so that there aren't kids wandering around. And I also tell them to collect everything they make with no judgments. The handouts reinforce their learning. I pre-teach some of the processes if they're complex, or if they have safety concerns, like, you've got hot wax, you've got super sharp needles that they're felting with. You want to be sure they understand those safety precautions. And I travel from station to station. I'll set it up to where the dangerous things are near each other, so that I can kind of be standing there watching both of them at the same time, to make sure things go well. So, like I said, collect your failures like jewels, because they could become successes. So we'll give this a watch. Mostly your hands.
Yes, come on. Can we borrow the yellow?
Yeah. Where's that dark red?
Can we borrow the yellow?
Yeah.
So I like to show this as well. So we'll watch this one too.
Today's not even
I'll put my small black
I didn't
line
really put two
right here
together.
to make it pop out a little bit.
So the voice of that boy that you just heard, he really did not like this class until this unit. When he got in this unit, suddenly he was like, oh my gosh, like for a while he wasn't even coming to class. And then he started coming because he loved this unit. He loved what he was learning. Prior to this, he couldn't really paint very realistically. He wasn't that good at all the like, paperwork kind of stuff that you have to do. But this unit got him to come out of his shell. He started talking to me. He started sharing his ideas. And it was really kind of magical to watch what happened because of this unit and felting. It really inspired him and it inspired me. The picture to the left is an encaustic that this girl made, and she suddenly started using color in ways she had never used color before because of the brightness and incredible detail that she was able to get with encaustics. So boot camp's over now. What do you do? So I like to give students time for digestion, just like after a really great meal, you want to have a little time to digest. So I usually have 1 or 2 class periods after a boot camp where they're given the opportunity to digest what they've learned, to process it, to figure out, okay, now that I did this, what am I going to do with it? So we usually design visual journal pages about the learning that happened. And then through those pages, they're proposing a final work of art that's somehow been inspired by this. I don't tell them what that art's going to be about. I specifically say, you can't come and meet with me one-on-one and say, I'm going to make an encaustic. No, you're not, okay? An encaustic is not an idea. That's just a process. That's a technique. So how are you going to further your voice as an artist? What's important to you? What do you want to say? So I really emphasize conceptual development, complex compositions. So how do these new things that you've learned fit into that practice as an artist? These are some pieces that students made, and I just think they're really beautiful. They really beautifully show what students did with that process time. The one in the upper left is huge. It's like a 4x6 digital photography thing. It started out as a collage of newspaper obituaries that she put together, and then she printed each square individually and then put all the squares together with those watercolor butterflies, and just a beautiful piece about how finite life is. The one in the upper right was actually during the pandemic, and so she made this at home where she had no paint. All she had was a Sharpie and coffee and tea. So she tried playing around with that and painting with coffee and tea. And then the one on the right is all about that love of nature, where she actually used natural materials even to make the frame with her felting. So in AP Art, this then lays the foundation for them to push it real good. I like salt and pepper, but anyway, so these are some AP Art students, and they sometimes come into AP where they're in these little boxes where they're really like perfectionisty and they want everything to be perfect and wonderful. And so sometimes I will do this, some units like this in AP Art to get them outside of that, to get them out of their comfort zone. The one of the shorts, that kid like didn't finish a project. We finally did this, and he was like, I'm gonna draw all over my pants. Can I do that? And I was like, go ahead, and so he did. The one in the middle, she like everything had to be real, super real. She painted this entire painting with a palette knife. Suddenly it was like, okay, I get it. So this one is my favorite though. This is Allison Loth, and she was one of those very perfectionist-y, meticulous, detail-oriented artists. Great student, but there was just something kind of missing. There wasn't that internal, voice, that who am I? What do I need to say? What is my thing? And so we did this kind of freeing thing, and she painted this picture. This is done on like a 5 foot by 6 foot piece of cardboard. And she told me about how we had a conversation about, what do you like? What's important to you? And she said, well, I'm on the golf team and I love golf. And so I said, well, why don't you make something about that? So this is a self-portrait that was her golfing, and she painted the entire thing with a golf ball and her golf club. There is no brush painting done on here. So the whole thing was mark making with a golf club and a golf ball on cardboard. And it was just this huge growth for her. She ended up graduating from college in architecture and just made some really incredible pieces as an architect, and is now working in that profession. So during quarantine, a lot of this, kind of went away. I didn't see my students anymore. A lot of them, I just saw them on a screen like you guys did, and they didn't have access to any of these cool supplies. What they had, though, at home is they all had their journals. And so I decided that the journal, I got this idea of the Hope Journal, and that we would start there. And so each week I chose a theme, and one skill that we would work on, and they could kind of interpret that however they wanted. I shared a lot of resources with them of like, try making art with food, try making paint with tea or coffee. Could you use ketchup? I don't know. Could you use makeup? So we started just kind of having these conversations of how could you make things to make marks with. And so these are some of their inventions. You've got honey with Sharpie over there with the bees, and a little bit of tea mixed in. The dolphin was made out of magazines that she cut up and made like little kind of beads with. Two of the food ones. I had one student that really got into the food art a lot and made some really cool things with it. And so just the kids were really playful, and they kind of took it on as like a challenge of, what could I do that would be new and different and unique? And those who did have paint at home, then yeah, go ahead and paint. But a lot of them chose to do other things. And, I love that excitement of, hey, Mrs. Bjork, I was eating lunch today and I saw art. So I made this art piece while I was about to eat my sandwich. And I love that. It was really cool and fun. And looking at art history and how are we in this historical moment? What could we do with that? Sitting on the pile of toilet paper and floating past with COVID. So I was really excited with how kids got through this and kind of saw their way through. I've been in person since the beginning of this school year. We did start with a hybrid model this year. So I've been seeing my students, not as often, but I do see them. And then beginning second semester, we went back to all full time. There are still some kids who are virtual, but I have all of my kids back with me. It was a little scary, but we all wear masks. We all clean like crazy. And I don't know, it's kind of working for us right now. It's really not been too bad. So one of the ways we got through the quarantine, I think, is, of course, all that creativity, but also I think it was really important to celebrate the successes. Last year, my AP kids didn't get to have their in-person art show. So we made one anyway. So this is their art show. I'm just going to show a little bit of it. And I think having that celebration of who they are, putting their names out there. This was published on the school's website. And I had it published. It's actually playing on video screens at school if there were people that came to school. We left it up all summer. Normally we take it down around graduation, but we left it up all summer so people could help us celebrate and look at the amazing work that they did. Another thing I think is a great way that we connected was through breakout rooms. I also used apps like Flipgrid. These were all ways to make these really great connections. And this, I'll publish this on that website too, so you can watch it more if you want to see it. So Flipgrid was cool. These are a couple Flipgrid videos. I'll just...
Hello. So my sustained investigation questions are...
Okay, and then
Hi,
there's this one.
Mackenzie. I first want to say that I love your piece. I love pointillism.
So we would create videos for critiques, and they would have an opportunity to tell about their own work, and then they would have an opportunity to talk to each other as well. So using Flipgrid was really great. And as a teacher, you can set it up with whatever kinds of directions you want. Going into breakout rooms, I think, is a great thing as well. I use those a lot for critique, as well as individual or little tiny like peer times to talk. This video here is just real quick. It's a speed dating critique that we did prior to quarantine, but I think, I don't know, like maybe it could work in breakout rooms. I haven't tried it yet that way, but it could. So I'll just show you a little snippet.
I like the black graphics because it's like in songs. They also have like shading something. So I feel like that too.
So, how can you still create those dynamic experiences in your classroom, but do that in your virtual classroom? So I think those are just some ideas of what I tried to do. These last couple things are just kind of thinking about, there's all these new digital tools that I've started to learn how to use in the last couple years. How have iPads and AR and VR and sound and video and time and animation, how has all of this stuff changed the mark making practice? I try to let kids make marks however they need to make marks. So if I have a student in drawing 2 saying, hey, I want to use photography in my drawing, can I try to say yes. I really try to let kids experiment and explore what they need to explore. I'm teaching a digital illustration class for only the second time. And that's really, I've learned a lot from the kids. And I've asked them to kind of like, invent your own brushes within those apps that we're using, and then share how you did that. What'd you do? And we kind of have like a, almost like a show and tell of how did you make this? And I'm learning from them a lot. There's a lot of freeware that I had to learn how to use because students only had Chromebooks at home. And so I had to teach things like graphic design and photography and animation from just on a Chromebook. So I learned a lot about freeware as well. And there's that handout is on my webpage as well, so you can access it. I think animation is probably my favorite way to kind of merge the old and the new, because you can do a lot of hands-on studio-based kinds of things and then bring those into software and digitize them and create really beautiful animation. And then, of course, if you haven't tried Procreate, you've got to try Procreate. It's incredible. So here's just a quick little animation. So the last part I'm going to share with you just real quick is my own art. This is a slideshow within the slideshow here. So I like to play and I just keep playing with stuff, whatever interests me. So these are some shibori stitching and indigo dye things that I made in the summer. I do fiber arts. I like knitting and felting. I like to do printmaking. These are some of my explorations there. I am a photographer at heart, and so you've got some anthotypes and some cyanotypes. And then, I'm going to just stop here. This is my master thesis exhibit, and this is where I finally kind of made this breakthrough in my art making. I'm not a sewer, but somehow I decided I needed to sew. So I made these. I wanted to tell the story of the women in my family and how the women in the kitchen during like holidays and stuff, they'd be in there and they'd be wearing aprons and they'd be telling the stories of our family and passing those stories down. And we were all kind of tied together through the stories and through those apron strings. And so the apron became kind of this symbol of the women in my family. Specifically, the brown one is my one grandma, the middle one is my other grandma, and the one on the right, the purple one, is my mom. And so the idea of this, of just kind of like, no, I'm not a sewer, but but I need to sew to make this. So I did photography on fabric using old school techniques like Van Dyke Brown printing and cyanotype printing. And then I made my own pattern for this apron and did it. So do what you need to do. Find the media you need to find. Be the artist who you need to be. Keep playing, keep exploring, keep practicing. And then this page is what I've lately been learning about. My school got an innovation center that has a laser engraver, a 3D printer, several 3D printers actually, and a vinyl cutter. And so I've been starting to play with that. So, can you print on fabric? Yes, you can with the laser etcher. Can you make a 3D printed photograph? You can. It's called a lithophane. That's what this one over here with Michelangelo is. What if I laser engrave a fern from my garden into a tile? Can I laser engrave one of my photographs into wood? Yes, you can. So these are my own experiments with just kind of trying stuff, laser engraving on leather as well. And so I just encourage you to keep playing, keep exploring, have fun. Have fun yourself and have fun with your students. Thank you so much for coming today. And as I said, a lot of these resources and handouts are going to be available on that website page with the QR code from the beginning. And this will all be uploaded as well to the NAEA app. Thank you so much.